Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is an intro to Webpack, and I'm going to introduce Webpack by just kind of slowly building up a React project with Webpack. Like, how could you just start with sort of nothing and get your React environment? So that way, if you want to build your own custom React environment, you can, or take some existing React boilerplate and like modify it. How would you do that? So what we're going to do is start off by just creating a new folder. We'll just call this Webpack React. And again, it's the same premise with like whether it's Rollup, Vite, Snowpack. Those are the main other bundlers. And Parcel. Parcel's a little bit easier to set up. That's sort of like the whole point of Parcel. But, you know, Webpack's kind of the standard, so I figured let's do that one. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project, npm init -y. Cool. And first thing I'm going to do is install Webpack. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to just create a script here. And we'll just call this Webpack. That's just literally just running the Webpack command. Okay, because I think out of the box, without doing any kind of configuration, that I should be able to create a folder called source. In that folder, create a new file called index.js. And we'll just put a console log in there. Console.log hello world. I forget if there's what the defaults are on Webpack. But then I should be able to do like npm run webpack. That's what it does. Oh, it wants me to install the Webpack CLI first. So let's do that. That's smart of Webpack. It's like, oh, you didn't install Webpack CLI first. Go do that. So it's going to install that for me. So see, it's installing that as a dev dependency. Technically, I should have installed Webpack as a dev dependency. And notice what it did. See, it is a new folder called dist here. Okay, and see, it has the same console log of hello world. That's what Webpack is, fundamentally. It's a bundler. Okay, so watch this. If I were to create another JavaScript file called cheese.js, and then I were to export, let's just say, module.exports equals cheese. Okay, just literally the string cheese. And then I go in here, and I say const cheese equals require dot slash cheese. Okay, and then I were to run Webpack again. Let's watch what happens. Now if I go back to my dist and I take a look at main, now notice there's all this extra code. Okay, so you see it has this extra code where it's defining the cheese. Okay, so you can see there, like, it's saying return, and basically how this code all works doesn't matter, but it's doing the same thing as I do here. So actually, if I do this and say just console log cheese, let's see what the resulting code looks like. Okay, and there you go. So it's these console logging R, and see here it's defining R, and R is this. Okay, it basically what it does, it takes all the files you have here, starts with index.js, and builds them all into one file. And the reason you do that is because for the longest time, JavaScript didn't have modules. JavaScript does have modules now. This is why you have like Vite and Snowpack that take advantage of that. So the idea was people wanted to write their JavaScript in many, many files, but on the front end, they had to kind of include one file using a script tag. You could do multiple files with multiple script tags, but then it gets kind of messy of like which one do you write first. So the idea here is the bundler bundles all the files. So that's essentially what the bundler does. That's what Webpack does fundamentally. But the cool thing about Webpack is that you can configure it to do all sorts of other things. Okay, you do that by creating what's called a webpack.config.js. Okay, and in here, essentially what webpack config.js does, it allows you to export an object, okay, that does all the things you want. So I like to be a little explicit, so I just say, hey, const config equals, and then I do the object, and at the end I will module.exports the object. Okay, and essentially whatever this is, whatever is exported at the end, gets passed as the configuration object to Webpack. So right now we have no settings. Okay, I do have an example of another one I built here, so we can kind of see some of the settings. Here I kind of have, it's a little bit more of a complex setup where I have two objects, and then I kind of mix and match depending what the settings are. We won't quite go down that rabbit hole, but let's kind of walk through it. So basically the idea here is you can choose like a different type of mode. Okay, what some people do is for the mode, they'll do something like this. Mode, and the mode will equal node the environmental variable process.env process.vscode.env.node env. That's sort of like the standard way of defining your standard environmental variable for defining your environment, whether it's development or production. So if this variable is defined, then we'll use that to define mode, process.env.node env. Otherwise, it just defaults to development. Okay, which is what I probably should have done in this original one. If I see there I have mode production, then I created like a separate object that has the mode of development. Okay, and kind of duplicated some stuff. Not too much, but okay. So that's what the mode does. It's saying, hey, what environment are you in, which determines certain things about how it builds things. Okay, entry point. What is the file that it's gonna? What file does it read first? Okay, how does it start bundling? Okay, it doesn't have to be index.js. It defaults to index.js. So if I'm okay with that, I can just leave that as is. I don't have to explicitly say source. But if you wanted to kind of change Webpack's behavior, you could do that. Okay, and I'll put a link to this just in the video description. Okay, now output. This is where the files should go. So by default, you see here that it's outputting to a folder called distribution into a file called main.js. We can change that. Okay, you'll notice that when you use React, it often outputs to a folder called build. Okay, so we can do that. We can say output. Okay, bundle.js path.resolve. So let's add that property. Okay, so this is basically saying, going forward, I want to add it to a build, and we'll just call this, you know, we.js. Okay, in a folder called whoa. Okay, and let's see if that works. Okay, let's see if I do this npm run webpack, does it do the different thing? Okay, mode option has not been set. Webpack will fall back to production for this value. Cool. I think it still just kind of did the same thing, so I think I actually have to add another flag. Let's see here, Webpack. Oh, that's how you specify environmental variables to production. Just remember. env production equals false. I see, because basically there's this object called env. Interesting. Got it. Okay. No, wait, did I call it the right name? I think it's supposed to be called webpack.config.js. And do I export it at the end? Report. Oh, I'm supposed to return a function. My bad. Okay, so essentially what this is going to export is a function, and then this function can return config. And then what happens here, you have this optional env object, which you could store environment variables specifically to here. So I could actually change this. Instead of doing this, I do env.mode. Okay, and essentially what would happen is I would put that in my wait, do I want to do it that way? env.mode. I'll just say, does env exist? No. Still not what I want to do. I like it that way. Again, you pretty much have limitless options. Like, that's the kind of the thing. Okay. And that returns. So let's try it now. Okay, did it still make no... Ooh, I guess it has to be in mode, production mode. Development. File name. Console reserver. Entry point. Module. Why is it not using my thing? Let me just read the warning here. So around Webpack asset main.js, minimize source bytes, Webpack 1.0. Warning and configuration, the mode option has not been set. Webpack will fall back to production. The mode option to develop production to enable defaults for each environment, blah, 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 blah. Oh, wait, did I put this in the wrong folder? That's why I put it in the wrong folder. Okay, there we go. Now let's try it out. Instead I get an error, but that's good. That means it's noticing it. And let's see, your path is not defined. Oh, I gotta import path. Okay, so we gotta import path. Okay. From path. Okay, because see, this is something from the node library, so I gotta import that since I'm using it there. So that should fix that. Still a different error now. Cannot use import statement outside a module. Oh, that's right. Const path equals require path. There we go. And there we go. So you see now, you should see there it made the folder called woo and the file called wee. Okay, and see it starts making the things. Okay, so we're kind of starting to see kind of how this all comes together. Okay, let's continue on. Okay, so now here's where most of the work's going to end up being. It's in this module and this plugin section. So the module section allows it to determine like which files it's going to compile and which loaders it's going to use in compiling them. Okay, so basically what you do is you start off with a property called module. Okay, and then I put a comma before the previous property, after the previous property. Okay, and I'll copy, and then you have this property called rules. I'll just copy it over. We'll go over it. I'll have to install some libraries, but we'll come back to that. So in this module, we define rules. Okay, and then you can read the documentation for each one of these as you install these different types of loaders. Okay. So essentially what happens like this first, so basically what you do is you pass it an array of rules. So the first rule, this is a regex saying, hey, for any file that ends in JavaScript or .jsx, okay, for the exception of anything inside the node modules folder, because you don't want to bundle your node modules folder because you have no idea what's in there and you might break stuff. Okay, so anything other than your node modules folder, use Babel Loader, okay, which will then use your Babel settings. Okay. Now for any files that is either a module.js file or just a normal JavaScript file, for the exception of anything in a folder called node modules or Bower components, which I'm not using Bower, so that shouldn't matter. You know, use the Babel loader. Okay. We're gonna use Babel preset env. Yeah, this is kind of duplicative actually. Not sure if I really need this extra Babel loader one. Okay. but I'll leave it because it's worked. Okay, thinking about why do I want this? Because this, well, technically this is probably the one I really don't need. This is kind of transforming. Now this is basically so this way I can use like class properties, which I use in some of my web component libraries, which is why I have this particular loader. Okay. Okay. And then this is for Sass files or CSS files. Okay. And what this does is first, and the way you have to read this is like it says, okay, this test is like what the file extension is, and then what it does, it says use these loaders. So first, it always does it back the last one first. So it's going to do Sass loader first. So it compiles the Sass to CSS. Then it takes the CSS and loads that and turns that into like JavaScript. And then this kind of like loads up all the styles into your final JavaScript file. So you don't end up having a separate CSS file. It ends up sort of, but again, when it's just a normal CSS file, we just want to use, we don't need the Sass loader, so we skip that. Okay, so you create all these rules with the different files, and there's a bunch of different loaders for different file types. You kind of go there, but theoretically I have to go now install all these loaders. So I'd have to like npm install. Okay, and this technically should be like say save, because these should all be dev dependencies. Save dev Babel Loader. Well, I'm going to need Babel if I need Babel Loader. Okay, then I need the preset, so Control C. These are all different libraries. And again, when you do these one by one, you just read the documentation. You kind of find out how to configure each piece as you go along. Control C. So, okay, then we have Sass loader. I want to install that. I want to install CSS loader. Oopsies, need a space there. And then last I need to do style loader. Oops. Paste. That'll install all that. That'll take a sec. So while that does that, let's keep examining. So that's how you would configure like that. Now the plugins, they do other things. So like clean Webpack login, I think cleans up like caches and stuff. The HTML plugin allows us to kind of specify like our own template, like index.html, that it's gonna like bundle everything with. So we'll add an index.html into our source folder, and then what it'll do is it'll take that file, render it into our target folder. Okay, and you'll see like and then output this particular bundle with this name. Okay, in the build folder. Okay, so it basically says it'll create the bundle.js, and notice like here it has this name thing. This is for what's called hashing. So what it's do is going to generate like a random name there. So that way, every time you build a new version of the bundle, the browser doesn't use the cached version. Okay, but path.resolve burn. So again, it just basically chunks out the HTML over into the folder, and then that's kind of that. Okay, and that would do that. Okay, trying to think if there's anything else I need to do here. Yeah, that's kind of how that would work. I notice I don't have, well, yeah, here's the JSX stuff for JSX files. But yeah, so let me just copy this plugin. So this plugin is extended with any plugins. Where does that array end? There's the start of that array, plugins. Oh, this is the output. Which don't I have the output up there already? Oh, I defined output twice. Okay. That's classy. And then optimization, this is just splitting chunks. Making sure that that all lines up. Let's just copy all that over. So that'd be after this. Okay, but technically I don't need two outputs, so I can get rid of the first output. Okay. And just make sure that module, that's inside, yeah. Okay. So, and now I need to install these things. I need to install, let me just kind of find those lines, make sure I'm using the right library names. So I'm going to copy this over. These are the two other things I need to import. Okay. And then I need to just install those. So npm install. And then these are also dev dependencies. Save dev, HTML, Webpack plugin, and clean Webpack plugin. And there's a whole world of like Webpack plugins. There's like, you can play with Webpack plugins till your eyes go blue. But let's see here. We installed those. I think I installed everything I need now. Name. Yeah, I don't think I referred to any more plugins there. So I think we're pretty good. Now the template's going to be an index.html, so I have to make an index.html here. Index.html. And then here I'm just going to do a boilerplate. Okay, and then here I'm just going to put a div, just a single div. Okay, and now what I can do is I can go to this index.js, import, well, I have to install React. So npm install React and React DOM. Okay, and let's see here. Let's hope for the best. I should be able to import React from React. Okay, and Webpack allows you to use whatever's in your source folder can use module syntax. So see, I can use the import statements because it all gets bundled. But import React from React, and then I can just be like, keep it real simple and just say, and then also need to import React DOM from React DOM, and just say React DOM dot render, and we will render just an h1 hello world to document dot query selector, and we'll just select that div. Okay, and there we go. So we're just saying, hey, render h1 hello world where that div is. Okay, so let's try that out. npm run webpack. Okay, let's see where the error is. For the experimental syntax, JSX isn't currently enabled. Build information. Add build plugins to the plugin section. And okay, I gotta add this. So I gotta add the React preset to Webpack, but you get the idea. So the idea is that basically I'd have to make sure I add the React stuff. I guess the sample I copied over doesn't include the specific React piece I need somewhere here. Or actually I think probably had a Babel config file that I don't have here at the moment. But essentially, that's how Webpack works. You just kind of configure it. You create this webpack.config, and then in your package.json you do Webpack. Okay, and then it's just going to read whatever's in your Webpack config, do that, and take whatever's in your source folder, unless you configure it to look somewhere else, and put it into the other folder that you specified. So basically, it just takes whatever is inside your input and outputs it, does whatever your modules and plugins say to do to those things, and churns it out. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of like how Webpack works. This is not meant to be sort of a very exhaustive explanation, but just to give you an idea, like if you're someone who's never really tinkered around with Webpack, an idea of like how do you set this stuff up. But I do have to be somewhere else, so like I will talk to you all later. And you can download any of my React templates to kind of see like exactly how the complete build there. My name is Alex Merced. Have a great day and enjoy.